verses 26 through 28. Y'all don't go back there. I'm just reading back where we were in Deuteronomy 32, because that says about Levi in verse 9, it said, who says of his father and mother, I have not seen them, nor did he acknowledge his brothers or know his own children. That sounds like a very strange thing to say about someone concerning Levi, right? Didn't acknowledge his mother and father, didn't know his own brothers, his own whatever. So what is this really talking about? So if we back up here, and this is what I'm thinking it's talking about, there in Exodus 32, in verse 26 through 28. Verse 26, then Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, whoever is on Yahweh's side, to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together to him, and he said to them, thus says Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, let every man put his sword on his side and go in and out from entrance to entrance throughout the camp. And let every man kill his brother, every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. So the Levites went through and began to kill. Remember, this is where all those people had turned against Yahweh and created the golden calf, began to worship something different, right? Now they're paying the punishment for it. Verse 28, so the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moshe, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. I believe this is what that's talking about there when he says they didn't acknowledge their brothers or know their own children, whatever. Is whoever was against Yahweh's word, they killed them. Didn't make any difference who or what, right? No partiality. Whoever is against Yahweh was an enemy. Okay? The thing about it is, we have to have that same zeal today. Anybody we're talking to, if they're against Yahweh and his word, are they our enemy? They aren't. Aren't they his? Did I get the right? Well, y'all know how long-winded I can get. What can I say? Okay. Go to Numbers chapter 25. Well, in this passage, you know, they had Israel had committed all kind of harlotry, and a plague was coming upon them. And then even one of the sons of Simeon, you know, brought a woman, a harlot, right out there in front of the camp and everybody, you know. In verse 10, then Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the sons of Israel, because he was zealous with my zeal among them, so that I did not consume the sons of Israel in my zeal. He's saying that Phinehas alone stopped him from killing all of the sons of who? Israel, all of them, in my zeal. Therefore say, behold, I give to him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and his descendants after him a covenant, or a cutting of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his Elohim and made atonement for the sons of Israel. The zealousness of one man brought a covenant of peace to the tribe. For how long? Everlasting. Now, I know a lot of people think something like that means temporary, but it it means everlasting, okay? Go to the book of Malachi in chapter 2. You know, Malachi is right in front of Matthew. That's almost part of the New Testament, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of people that teach association just because of where it falls in the text, you know. No. Malachi chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. And yet everybody today likes to, I mean, you might be talking to some of these people, some of these pastors or some of these evangelists, you know, and say, well, don't y'all think that Yahweh has called all of us to be priests today? Oh, yeah, they'll say, yeah. We're supposed to be a kingdom of priests, right? They all say that. Well, here in Malachi, he has a message for you. And now, O priest, this commandment is for you. If you will not hear, and if you will not take it to heart to give glory to my name, says Yahweh of hosts, I will send a curse upon you, and I will curse your blessing. Yes, I have cursed them already, because you do not take it to heart. Behold, I will rebuke your descendants and spread dung on your faces. That really is the number 6569. Peresh, it means dung. The dung of your solemn feast, and one will take you away with it. He's saying you've taken these feasts which are your mine, and you've turned them into something for yourself. Organized religion today has taken what he's given to the sons of Israel and turned it into something they say, well, some of them bad things belong to the Jews, but the rest of it, the good stuff, is ours. They've split it up and taken what they want out of it. It's become a Luby's type thing. Pick and choose what they want. In verse 4 he said, then you shall know that I have sent this commandment to you, that my covenant with Levi may continue, says Yahweh of hosts. My covenant was with him of life and peace, and I gave them to him that he might fear me. So he feared me and was reverent before my name. The law of truth was in his mouth, and injustice or unrighteousness was not found on his lips. He walked with me in peace and equity, and turned many away from iniquity. Verse 7, for the lips of a priest should keep knowledge. And people is implied here. People should seek what from his mouth? The Torah. And you know, most of the people out there who claim to be these priests say things like, that old Torah, that law, done away with. And yet this says if they really want to be priests, that people should come to them and seek the Torah from their mouth. For he is the messenger of Yahweh of hosts. Now, if you stop and think about that verse very carefully, if you throw out what Yahweh said and try to give him something else, then you are no longer a messenger of Yahweh. The only way that you can be a messenger of Yahweh is to take what he said and you say that to somebody else, and then you are the messenger of Yahweh to that person. How else can it be? I think that's kind of short and simple. Okay. Go back to Deuteronomy 33. We'll look at Benjamin. Well, actually, we need to finish up there in Judah. In verse 10, they shall teach Yaakov your judgment and Israel your law. They shall put incense before you and a whole burnt sacrifice on your altar. Bless his substance, Yahweh, and accept the work of his hands. Strike the loins of those who rise against him and of those who hate him, that they rise not again. That's quite a blessing, quite a promise to those of the descendants of Levi. Verse 12 of Benjamin, he said, and remember Benjamin, the number is 1144. It means son of the right hand. Of Benjamin he said, the beloved of Yahweh shall dwell in safety by him. He shelters him all the day long, and he shall dwell between his shoulders. Go to Ezekiel 48. In verse 22. Now, he's talking about here, and he shall dwell between his shoulders, okay? In Ezekiel 48, this is in the future, and it's a redistribution of all the land of Israel. And in verse 22, it says, moreover, apart from the possession of the Levites and the possession of the city, in the midst of what belongs to the prince, the area between the border of Judah and the border of Benjamin shall belong to the prince. The area between Judah and Benjamin shall belong to the prince. The border between these two falls across a place called Mount Moriah. The temple was in the land of Benjamin, and the courts of the temple were in the land of Judah. Now, somewhere kind of who dwelt in that center part? That's Yahweh, wasn't it? I thought that's kind of interesting. Go back to 33. Verse 13. Everybody likes it. We get down and talk about Joseph. And of Joseph he said, blessed of Yahweh is his land, which with the precious things of heaven, with the dew and the deep lying beneath, with the precious fruits of the sun, with the precious produce of the months, with the best things of the ancient mountains, with the precious things of the everlasting hills, with the precious things of the earth and its fullness, and the favor of him who dwelt in the bush. The favor of him who dwelt in the bush. The favor of him, Yahweh, who dwelt in the bush. The favor of him is going to be on all this land given to Joseph. Let come on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him who is separate from his brothers. His glory is like a firstborn bull, and his horns are like the horns of the wild ox. Together with them he shall push the peoples to the ends of the earth. They are the 10,000s of Ephraim and the thousands of Manasseh. The thousands and the 10,000s, Ephraim and Manasseh. Those two began to spread everywhere within the northern kingdom of the tribes of the kingdom of Israel. Remember Joseph, the number is 3130 is the number for his name, Yosef. The word itself means Yah has added. Okay? The tense here, 3254, Yosef, meaning to add or contrive to add. And then Ephraim means what? Double fruit. And Manasseh is causing to forget. If we go back to Genesis 48, in verse 19, we have to remember, as we read in Deuteronomy here, we have a blessing which comes on, the sons, right? And yet here he's talking about Joseph, but he's talking about Ephraim and Manasseh, the two sons of Joseph. Joseph was actually the son of Yaakov, not Ephraim and Manasseh. So we need, how did Ephraim and Manasseh become sons of Yaakov? And then here in Genesis 48 and verse 19, well, actually in verse 16, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, let my name be named upon them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Yitzhak. Let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. In these passages here, he actually adopted Ephraim and Manasseh and let them become like Simeon and Levi, like the rest of his sons. And then in 19, when he switched his hands between Ephraim and Manasseh as to who received the blessing of the firstborn, in verse 9 he said, his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations, is what it says in English, but in the Hebrew it's Melogoyim, the fullness of the Gentiles. The Melogoyim, the fullness of the nations. And who's he talking about? Ephraim. Everybody's trying to figure out what tribe, and chances are we from Ephraim. I think that's kind of neat.
House of Joseph?
Yeah. You're going back to Deuteronomy 33. Verse 18 and 19, he's talking about Zebulun. And of Zebulun, he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and Issachar in your tents. They shall call the peoples to the mountain. A lot of people, they're going to be on the mountain calling the people to the mountain, right? So evidently a lot of those people that are there in the mountains of Israel now are really of the tribe of Zebulun, and they're calling what? Calling the people back to the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness. What is righteousness? Obedience to the Torah. There they shall offer sacrifices of obedience to the Torah. You realize right now a whole lot of those people that are living on those lands, in the mountains of Israel, trying to walk in obedience to the Torah are being persecuted for it tremendously. Some of the cities and tribes and the settlements are being dismantled, and they're giving those things over to the so-called Palestinians. That people didn't exist until 1948. Before that time, they were just Arabs. Verse 19 again, they shall call the people to the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness. For they shall partake of the abundance of the seas and of treasures hidden in the sand. The name Zebulun, the number is 2074, it means a dwelling place. And Issachar is the number 3485, meaning he will bring a reward. Go to Isaiah chapter 9. In verses 1 and 2. And here he says, nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed, as when at first he lightly esteemed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward more heavily oppressed, by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, in Galilee of the Gentiles. Now here is Isaiah talking about this land up right around the Sea of Galilee, and he calls it Galilee of the Gentiles. Why? Remember, the house of Israel was taken captive and scattered out among all the other nations of the world. And Assyria, when they did that, they went and took captives from the other nations of the world and brought them down and put them in the land of Galilee. And it became known as Galilee of the Gentiles. Verse 2, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them that light has sinned. Where did Messiah make his headquarters when he came? Around the Sea of Galilee. And upon those people a great light has shined. Go to Matthew 4. In verses 12, well, we'll just start in verse 12. It says, now when Yehosha heard that Yochanan had been put in prison, he departed to Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, Capharnaum, which is by the sea in the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali. He came and dwelt in Capharnaum, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sat in darkness saw a great light, and upon those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. Between the time of 722 BC, when Israel went into captivity, and the time Messiah came around the year 4 BC, you got what, 700 years in there or more between those two. The Messiah, what now, is now living in Capharnaum, the city of comfort. And he traveled most of the time around in the area of what used to belong to Israel, because that's where he did all his ministry, because he came to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The only time Messiah ever came down in Jerusalem was to celebrate what? The festivals, which all men were commanded to do at that time. But he spent most of his time where? Traveling around in Israel, reaching the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Because a lot of them had come back, maybe one at a time, singly, just moving back in, you know. But they were never really accepted as true people of the land. Back in Genesis 49. In verses 14 and 15. This is talking about Issachar. And it said that Issachar is a strong donkey, lying down between two burdens. He saw rest good, and the land pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a band of slaves. They just kind of, you know, figured, well, everything was good, you know, as long as we keep doing what we're told to do, we get fed, so they just kind of bowed down and became a band of slaves. Go to 1 Chronicles chapter 12. These are a lot of the people that were beginning to follow David. And in verse 32, a lot of these people had come to David, and as you go through here, it talks about the characteristics of the different people from the different tribes and what they had, to do. And here in verse 32 it says, of the children of Issachar, who had understanding of the times, to know what Israel ought to do. Their chiefs were 200, and all their brethren were at their command. See, this is describing all those of the different tribes as they came to walk with King David. Or to walk with David. I guess these were the ones who became known as the band of outlaws and rebels and so forth, the mighty men that began to join with King David. And these talks about these were what? Those who had understanding of the times. I think we need to have understanding of the times we live in right now. Go to Matthew 16. Verses 1 through and 4. Messiah kind of said the same thing to those people when he upbraided them, when he came, right? How many times did he talk about, you should have known when he was coming, right? He stopped outside the city and he wept and he said, you condemn yourself because you knew not the day of your visitation. He expected them to know when he was coming. If they were supposed to know when he came the first time, shouldn't we be expecting him the second time and know when he's coming? Here in Matthew 16, verses 1 through 4, then the Pharisees and Sadducees came and testing him asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said to them, when it's evening, you say it'll be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning you say it'll be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening. You hypocrites! You know how to discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. We got a whole lot more people today who can tell what's happening by the weather. They know about tornadoes and all kinds of stuff, but they don't have any idea of the signs of the time. They don't realize that, didn't he say that in the last days things will be coming on the earth and people be running around screaming and hollering and everything and crying and being afraid of what's coming on the earth? And all those things are happening, and he said all they can do is talk about the hurricanes that are coming. They have no idea why. Thousands of earthquakes happening all the time. There get to be so many of them every day now they don't even hardly report them anymore in the papers. Why? They don't discern the signs of the times. Verse 4, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Should we be asking for a sign ourselves today, or should we be able to look at what's going on around the world and say, hey, this matches Scripture and I know what time frame we're in? Why do we need a sign? He's told us what's fixing to happen in His Word. Do we believe it? So if we know that, then does that put us kind of a step ahead of the others, right? As long as we know what's happening, then we can be prepared for what's coming. But our number one preparation is to be dressed in His armor, which is walking in all of this Word, right? Okay. Go back to Deuteronomy. Verse 20, and of Gad he said, blessed is he who enlarges Gad. He dwells as a lion and tears the arm and the crown of his head. He provided the first for himself, because a lawgiver's portion was reserved there. Remember, Gad took half the tribe of Gad, and they settled, across on the east side of the Jordan River. And he said that a lawgiver's portion was reserved there. Who was the lawgiver? Moshe. Moshe died over there, and Moshe was buried over there, on the other side of the Jordan, right? A lawgiver's portion was there. He came with the heads of the people. He administered the justice of Yahweh and His judgments with Israel. Now Gad did come, and he came into the land, and all of the members of Gad, you know, they followed with the rest of them, and they helped all the rest of them acquire their inheritance before they went back and took their inheritance. So they did what they said they would do. And Yahweh, through Moshe, gave them what he said he could have. Verse 22, and of Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Bashan. Bashan is the area we call today the Golan Heights. That's what that is. And of Naphtali he said, Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full of the blessing of Yahweh, possessed the west and the south. That word west there is the number 3220. It's the word Ya'am, which means sea. So possessed the sea and the south. The Naphtali was up around the Sea of Galilee, not necessarily the Mediterranean, but the Sea of Galilee. And of Asher he said, Asher is most blessed of sons. Let him be favored by his brothers, and let him dip his foot in oil. You know, a lot of people today, and there's a group of people over there in Israel today are thinking about Asher and those things, about dipping his foot in oil, and they're looking in that area, and they're actually drilling oil for oil in Israel in these areas. And we had a paper the other day that said that they've gone through some layers of soil, which they haven't, you know, hit anything yet, but they expect to within the next few months. And they say what they expect to hit is going to fix it where Israel never has to buy another quart of oil from nobody. Wouldn't that be marvelous?
Hallelujah.
You reckon that'd make somebody happy?
Oh, yeah.
I wonder why Asher means happy. I think that's kind of good, don't you? Verse 25, your sandals shall be iron and bronze or copper. As your days, so shall your strength be. You're saying your strength is going to last as long as you live. Verse 26, there's no one like the El of Yeshurun. There's no one like the El of the upright, who rides the heavens to help you, and in his excellency on the clouds. The eternal Elohi is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He will thrust out the enemy from before you and will say, destroy. You're going to thrust out the enemy and then say, destroy. You're the one that has to destroy the one that's trying to take you away from Yahweh. Then Israel shall dwell in safety, the fountain of Yaakov alone. Isn't it funny? He calls Israel the fountain of Yaakov. In a land of grain and wine, his heaven shall also drop dew. Happy are you, O Israel, who is like you, a people delivered by Yahweh. He came to deliver his people, right? How come so many people in the world are saying all that old stuff is done away with, and Yahweh got a new people and a new country, a new everything, right? And all that old stuff belongs to the Jews, but we just have to do the new stuff, whatever that is. I mean, they're, you know. And then he called the shield of your help, the sword of your majesty. Your enemies shall submit to you, and you shall tread down their high places, or really you shall tread down their places for pagan worship. Don't y'all know that'd be fun? Treading down them high places for pagan worship, you know. And the thing about it is, when you go through there and start stomping on all them things, you run into a lot of them people that you used to know, and they used to say things like, you know, that old stuff is done away with, and you look at them and say, what's this? Okay. Shouldn't be that way, I know. That word fountain there in verse 28, the fountain of Yaakov, the number is 5869. It's the word een, or E-E-Y-N, een, ayin, eyin. It can be said a lot of different ways. But it's as the eye of the landscape, or actually it's that portion in the landscape which draws your eye. You walk in a gate in a garden somewhere, and there's something in that garden somewhere that just draws your eye to that point immediately. That's the eye of that landscape. That's what draws your eye immediately. Then Israel shall dwell in safety, the fountain of Yaakov, the eye. Now remember, Yahweh said that what? He shall keep those as the apple of his eye, the little man of the eye. You stick your finger, or you heard one of those people of his, and he said it's like sticking something in his eye. Because that's his people, the apple of his eye. Chapter 34. Then Moshe went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is across from Jericho. And Yahweh showed him all the land of Gilead as far as Dan, all Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the western sea, that's the Mediterranean. Now in verse 1 up there, this Mount Nebo, remember we looked at that, it's the number 5015, and it means prophet, the mountain of the prophet. Brown Driver Briggs also says that that's the name of a Babylonian city or a deity who presided over learning and letters. This word Nebo, meaning the prophet, in the Greek, this word Nebo becomes Hermes, the god Hermes in the Greek. In the Latin, it becomes the name Mercury. Okay? In the Egyptian, this becomes the name of Thoth. You know how we went through it, all the plagues, you know, all the different gods of Egypt, all these. People don't realize all these same gods are the same gods that exist throughout the world. They just got different names in different languages, but it's the same thing. And Jericho, the number is 3405. Now I know we've talked about Jericho as being the city of palms, right? But the name Jericho itself actually means its moon, I-T apostrophe, its moon.
What was that number again?
3405.
Thank you.
But in verse 3 it says, the south and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. Now it refers to Jericho as the city of the palm trees. So in that respect, Jericho was the first city that was given to the children of Israel, right? And remember they all went around and he said, you know, you go around the city for 7 days and you be really, really, really quiet and don't say nothing. And then on the 7th day you blow the shofar and then you shout, and then you shout and you go up. Every man straight before him, right? So the city of the palms was the one that he gave to him with the blowing of the shofar, the city of palms. And inside the temple, when Solomon built it, the inside of the holy place was lined with what? Cedar boards, and carved into those was palm trees that were overlaid with gold. Okay? And that was the city of palms. In verse 4 it said, then Yahweh said to him, this is the land of which I swore to give Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, saying, I will give it to your descendants. Hey, we're still some of those descendants, and we're still looking forward to that land. I have caused you to see with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. So Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of Yahweh. See there? He died in the land of Moab. Now you go back over to verse 21 of 33, and it said, because the lawgiver's portion was reserved there. That was reserved for Moshe. He died there. But some of the other children of Israel got their portion in that same land. Okay? It's not like it was just totally excluded. He just didn't cross over the river. But all of that land belonged to the children of Israel. So in verse 6, and he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows his grave to this day. You realize what would happen if somebody ever found that grave?
Oh my goodness.
They'd have been building 1,400 churches on it, wouldn't it? Or anything else that they can do. Go to Zechariah chapter 3. Zechariah chapter 3. Back in verse 6, he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows his grave to this day. And here in Zechariah chapter 3, verse 2, this is where it's talking about Yehoshua, or what we call Joshua, the cleansing of Joshua, the high priest. in verse 2, and he says, and Yahweh said to Satan, Satan, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Yahweh, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? You know, a brand is generally a stick that's smoldering. When you yank it out of the fire, it smolders, right? And he says, is this not a brand plucked from the fire? Now go to Jude chapter 9. Verse 9, excuse me. I hope nobody's looking for chapter 9. Yeah. In verse 9 of Jude it said, yet Michael the archangel, in contending or arguing with the devil, with Satan, when he disputed about the body of Moshe, dared not bring against him a reviling accusation, but said, Yahweh rebuke you. Have you ever heard people out there today that's trying to fight battles, and they go out there rebuking Satan and rebuking this, and they're going to anoint that, and people go through and they anoint all the chairs, in the congregation. They're going to keep Satan from coming in, and then after he gets in there, then they go through trying to cast him out. Why do they go through all this anointing stuff to keep him from coming in there, and then go in there trying to cast him out after he gets there? Didn't tell him anything. Didn't work. Yeah. Where did Yehoshua run into the first demon-possessed man? In a synagogue. They can be anywhere. Standing right in front of Yehoshua. Okay? Why do people think that they can go against the words of the Torah and then go in there and put some oil on a chair and anoint it and say nothing bad going to sit in this chair? Okay? And it doesn't, Obedience is the only thing that keeps Satan at bay. And the scriptures plainly tell us, if you obey him, then he must flee. So the only thing that keeps him away is your obedience to his word. We want to raise our children. We want to send our children to school and all these different places in the world. You want to put them out there walking on the sidewalks. The very best protection you can give them is the truth of Torah surrounding that child as he walks. I would submit to you there's an awful lot of children being lost every day because they don't have the Magen David, the shield of David. They don't have Yahweh and the Torah surrounding that child as protection. They need it. You can tell them, but then if you do something different, then your actions tell them something different what your words say. Because they know what you say and they're going to believe what you do. Okay? It's obvious. Go back to Deuteronomy. Verse 7 says, Moshe was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor abated or reduced. At 120, his eyes were good, and his natural vigor, his natural ability, were not abated. He was just as strong then as he ever was. Can you imagine that at 120? And we hit 40 and it's like, oh my goodness, I'm middle-aged or whatever. They have some kind of a crisis or whatever, right? Excuse me?
Stop it.
Stop it? Oh, okay, I'm meddling now, okay. Verse 8, and the children of Israel wept for Moshe in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moshe ended. We wept for 30 days. Verse 9, now Yehoshua ben Nun. Isn't that a beautiful name? Yehoshua ben Nun. Yehoshua, Yahweh is the deliverer, the Son of the Eternal, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moshe had laid his hands on him, so the children of Israel heeded him and did as Yahweh had commanded Moses. It's kind of like saying that Yehoshua carried on what Moses started. Isn't that kind of neat? He did, didn't he? I guess that's what it means when it says that in Romans, do we nullify the law? God forbid. No. By accepting Yehoshua and what he did for us, we established the law, the Torah. The Torah is a Torah of life, right? And that Torah of life was established in a covenant cut in the blood of Messiah. And when we accept that, then we establish the Torah in our life. Verse 10. But since then there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moshe, whom Yahweh knew face to face. and all the signs and wonders which Yahweh sent him to do in the land of Egypt, before Pharaoh, before all his servants, and in all his land, and by all that mighty power and all the great terror which Moshe performed in the sight of all Israel. Moses was sent to do his works in the land of Israel. And I guess some people are getting ready to do something right now. I think just because we finished a book. Did we just finish a book?
Yes.
And we have a tradition. What are we supposed to do? We say something. Oh, we say what? Kazak, Kazak, Venice Kazak. Be strong, and may we be strengthened. Okay. Wonder where we get that from.
Yes, it's a good tradition.
It's a good tradition, huh? Well, we'll go over to the book of Joshua because you're right there close to it, right? In the same neighborhood. And we're just going to read the book of Yehoshua. Well, just chapter 1. And we're just going to read down through verse 9. Okay? Because that's where we get this Kazak, Venice, Kazak.
That's right.
In Joshua chapter 1, it says, after the death of Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, it came to pass that Yahweh spoke to Yehoshua ben Nun, Moshe's assistant. Doesn't that sound strange? Say, talk to Yehoshua, the son of the eternal, as being Moses' assistant. But it's what Moshe wrote that Yahweh came to establish.
They did work together, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Verses 2, he says, Moshe, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise. Go over this Yarden, this descender, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them. The children are the sons of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moshe. How come people today like to say all that old stuff belongs to the Jews, but all the new stuff belongs to us, and they want to go out, walking around and saying, every place my foot's going to speak, or set, he give to me. That's stealing from Joshua. Because that's what he told him, wasn't it? Is that what they're doing, stealing from them?
Well, they do it in this land.
Uh-huh.
They can't go to Israel.
Verse 4. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. Boy, that's a lot of land. No man shall stand before you all the days of your life. He doesn't say that no man is going to come out, not come out against you. He said they won't stand. As I was with Moshe, I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong. Kazak, Kazak. Be strong, be strong. Isn't that what we just got through saying? But he's telling him, be strong and of good courage. If we didn't need strength and courage, he wouldn't tell us that, would he? For to this people you shall divide or give as a possession and inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Who's going to divide the land to the inheritance? Yehoshua. You see the picture here? Long time ago, if the translators had done their job correctly, and if we'd have seen Yehoshua instead of Joshua, or if we'd have seen Yehoshua instead of Jesus, Joshua doing the same thing, we would have been able to come to the same conclusion. Moshe brought them right up to the Jordan River. Right? Yehoshua carries them in. Verse 7, only be strong and very courageous. Oh, he said that a second time. I guess that's why we say Kazak, Kazak. Be strong, be strong. We say it twice. Because they did, huh? And very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the Torah which Moshe, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. Word number prosper there, the number is 7919. I'll tell you what it means here in just a minute. That you may prosper wherever you go. Verse 8. Ha-Sefer Torah, this book of the Torah, shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate or be constantly in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. And the word success is the number 7919. Same as prosper up there in verse 7. The simple definition of that word means to always make the right decision at every time. I mean, can anybody imagine what would be more prosperous than always making the right decision at the right time?
Yeah, because you would prosper.
Oh my, can you imagine?
Yeah. What was that number again?
79:19.
Oh, okay.
Verse 9, he says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for Yahweh Eloheka is with you wherever you go.
You can't have a better promise.
You really can. So you can understand how come we then as a group, when we finish a book, we say, Kazak, Kazak, Venice Kazak. Be strong, and may we be strengthened. And we say that to one another, together, as a group, as we go into that promised land. Following Yehosha and being prosperous because we walk in the promises of Yahweh through the Torah to receive the blessings. I mean, that's a marvelous thing, okay? And so many people are so deluded into believing something else. Anyway, that actually concludes the readings of the Torah, concludes the readings of Torah. We'll be starting, later on in the book of Genesis as we begin back in Bereshit. Go to 1 Kings chapter 8. In this passage in 1 Kings chapter 8, this passage of Scripture is talking about Solomon after he had completed the construction and everything of the temple in Jerusalem, right? And after the construction of the temple was when the orders of the priesthood began to be established and so forth, and the festivals began to be celebrated there. And now all the people had a place in Jerusalem, the place where Yahweh had chosen to put his name where they could come at the festivals. It's the place where he has chosen and offer the sacrifices and everything that he had there. I had made up a bunch of sheets of the year 4 BC. What did I do with them?
Don't ask me. You want me to go look?
Yes, please. I think they're on the top of the thing in there on the desk. I ran a bunch of copies. I know everybody may have one or something, but in case you lost one or something, I wanted you to get a copy and get it in your hands. And I just want to give you an idea of kind of how to look at it and study it so that you can study it yourself. Because sometimes these things takes a going over and going over and going over and trying again and again and again before you really get it straight, okay?
Put something in it?
Do what?
Usually when you would put love, you can't find it.
Now those of you out in telephone land, all you got to do is go to our website, yeshivahanattiv.org, and go to the button that says year 4 BC and click on it, and you can download and print a copy for yourself. Now, and here in a minute, if y'all want to, we got some time here. We may go over this a little bit.
Color copy?
Sure. You have these made up, Betty? You have these made up too?
Somewhere.
You just ask her if we have some of them, and she says somewhere, and then she was fussing about where I put
We just
stuff.
moved, remember? Oh.
You know what we really need is somebody to come in and start going through all of our files and organize and file everything where it's supposed to be. And that means making files, and putting names on the file. We're not too good at filing stuff. Whenever we file it, it generally winds up in file 13 or something.
I hunt until I find it.
Yeah, well, we hunt and hunt and hunt and hunt and hunt, hoping we're going to find it. And sometimes a year later, we still hunting. Okay, in 1 Kings chapter 8, look in verse 54. And so it was when Solomon had finished praying all this prayer and supplication to Yahweh. All this prayer and supplication, where did he start? Go back over and look at verse 22. Then Solomon stood before the altar of Yahweh in the presence of all the congregation of Israel and spread out his hands toward heaven, and he said, Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, no Elohim in heaven above or on earth below like you, who keep your covenant and mercy with your servants who walk before you with all their heart. People can say all they want to about the covenant of Yahweh and all that old stuff is done away with, and yet Yahweh plainly says he keeps mercy and covenant with those who keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. You can't disregard those statements. So here again in 54, and so it was when Solomon had finished praying all this prayer and supplication to Yahweh that he arose from before the altar of Yahweh, from kneeling on his knees with his hands spread up to heaven. Then he stood and blessed all the congregation of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be Yahweh, who has given rest or peace to his people Israel, according to all that he promised. There has not failed one word of all his good promise which he promised through his servant Moshe. May Yahweh Eloheinu be with us as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us nor forsake us, that he may incline our hearts to himself, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments and his statutes and his judgment which he commanded our fathers. If people continue to say all this old stuff is done away with, they're rubbing out the prayers of Moshe, they're rubbing out the prayers of Solomon, they're rubbing out the prayers of Yahweh, they're rubbing out the prayers of Yehoshua himself. They don't realize what they're doing. Verse 59, and may these words of mine with which I have made supplication before Yahweh be near Yahweh Eloheinu day and night, that he may maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel as each day may require. Notice what he's praying. He's praying that you will maintain the cause of your people day by day by day, whatever it is they need. Verse 60, that all the peoples of the earth may know that Yahweh is Elohim, there is no other. Let your heart therefore be loyal to Yahweh Eloheinu, to walk in his statutes and keep his commandments as at this day. Solomon's prayer that all of the house of Israel would be loyal to Yahweh and keep his commandments. Verse 62, then the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before Yahweh. And Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offering, which he offered to Yahweh, 22,000 bulls and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of Yahweh. This was the completion of the temple. On the same day, the king consecrated the middle of the court that was in front of the house of Yahweh. For there he offered burnt offerings, grain offerings, and the fat of the peace offerings, because the copper altar that was before Yahweh was too small to receive the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the fat of the peace offerings. At that time Solomon held a feast, and all Israel with him, a great congregation from the entrance of Hamath to the brook of Egypt before Yahweh Eloheinu, 7 days and 7 more days, 14 days. On the 8th day, he sent the people away, and they blessed the king and went to their tents joyful and glad of heart for all the goodness that Yahweh had done for his servant David and for all Israel his people. 7 days and 7 more days. He did it twice. In all of the scriptures, you know, where a dream came twice, or a prophecy came twice, or Yahweh said something twice, it was always to verify that it was sure and that it would come to pass. And on the 8th day, the king of peace sent them where? He sent them all away, and they went to their own tent, their own ochel, went into their own tabernacle. And on the 8th day is a picture of all of us going into our tabernacle with Yahweh, Yehoshua the Mashiach. Now, if we go on in chapter 9, you know, and it talks about after he had built the house, and he went to build his own house. But in those sheets that she just passed out, and I hate that, can you hand me one of those, please? Because I didn't have one, and I'm wired up.
What did you do with the master?
What I do with the master, it's on the computer, on the website. I didn't have a copy sheet. I just downloaded it from the... This is black and white.
I know, it's all the time.
Oh. Well, that's right there, it's colored.
My colour?
Yes,
That's
please.
Dave's.
Huh?
Dave won't have one.
Well, I'll give it back to him. I'll just want to borrow it from him. You'll see why here in just a second when I'm talking about this, because I got to refer to the colors. I can't do it in black and white. Okay. If you'll notice in the center of this little sheet, it says the calendar events for the year 4 BC. And on the left-hand side in the center, in the red, or the pink, or whatever color that is, light purple, I don't know what it is. The alignment here showing the Hebrew months and the Roman months is based on the Jewish Encyclopedia, Volume 3, page 508, which shows that Tishrei 1 and September the 4th can occur on the same day. This year that we are following put Tishrei 1, I don't think it actually occurred on the 4th, but it was on the 6th, within 2 days of what this calendar showed, right? Which means that the year of the birth of Messiah and this year that we're living in right now almost exactly matched. Excuse me?
It's on the fifth.
On the 5th. 1 day difference. Okay? So many people said we were wrong in what we were trying to do. They said, oh man, you're celebrating everything too early, a month too early, and they're all going to do things a month later and all this kind of stuff. And yet we did everything based on what? The barley in the first of the year, right, when the barley was in the green, and we counted that new moon, and then we just been counting every new moon up to then, and now we're in the 7th month. And then back in the summer, you know, we were in Israel when they were harvesting the wheat. And we were there on a Monday, they were harvesting the wheat. We came back on Thursday, and what did we celebrate on Sunday? Shavuot, the first fruits of the wheat harvest. If you do it a month later, you can't have first fruits. All you can have is the later fruits, or the leftovers. You don't celebrate with the leftovers. He's first fruits. I don't know why people can't really see that and understand it. Now, if you'll notice there, it said the order of the priesthood is from 1 Chronicles chapter 24. So go with me to 1 Chronicles chapter 24. Now, this may be kind of old hat to a lot of people, but for those of you that haven't really been able to go through this thing, it'll give you a good idea of how to study it and how to use it and how to use it as a teaching tool. 1 Chronicles chapter 24. And in verse 6, and the scribe Shemaiah, the son of Nathaniel, one of the Levites, wrote them down before the king, the leaders, Zadok, the priest, Ahimelech, the son of Abiathar, and the heads of the fathers of the priests and Levites, one father's house taken for Eleazar, and one for Ithamar. Now the first lot fell to Jehoiarib, the second to Jedaiah, the third to Harim, the fourth to Seorim, the fifth to Malchiah, the sixth to Mijamin, the seventh to Hakoz, the eighth to Abiyah. The eighth to Abiyah. Now on this calendar that you're looking at, you'll notice the top is got like half of the year, and the bottom is one half of the year. On the top, you've got all those little dates in there, though the weeks of the month are in black, and then part of it, or on mine, it's kind of a blue-green, kind of a turquoise color, I guess. And one of them in the blue-green is the Hebrew months, and in the black, it's got the Roman months underneath it. Y'all all see that? Up above, on that first line at the top, you'll see the first week has a number 24 above that week. See that? The next week then is a number 1. The numbers 1 through 24 are recognizing the 24 courses of the priesthood. Okay? Let's come down to the bottom half in the month of Tishrei, and above the week of the 17th to the 23rd, and through those dates there, we have the Sullot or Tabernacles, according to Leviticus 23, falling on that day. We have the birth of Messiah written in there, and then we have the word Deuteronomy 16:16 with the word all. What those are saying is during that week there is Sullot or Tabernacles, And then if you go down, you see the word Tishrei, then underneath that September, and then we've got a block that's outlined with a line. And it says the temple was finished and dedicated by Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 8. We just got through reading that, okay? It also reflected over in 2 Chronicles chapter 5 verse 3, and then it says the feast lasted for 14 days, and that's in 1 Kings 8:65, and it's spoken again in 2 Chronicles 7, 8, and 9. There's two witnesses to the same thing. All of that took place during that time frame there when we were talking about the festival of Sukkot would have lasted, 7 days prior to, and then 7 days during the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles, when it was, when it was